All right. Well, welcome to all of our viewers. We are here in the pre-conference webinars for the Revolution Education Congress that's going to happen in Bogota last week in April, Bogota and Cartagena. We are here with Sofia Leal, who's going to introduce our guest speaker today.
So, hey, welcome to the Revolution in Education Congress. My name is Sofia Leal. I am a student in Gimnasio Los Cabos at high school, and I'll be the moderator of this present conference. As Gabriel told you, we're going to have Juan Pablo Suarez, who is the high school director of Gimnasio Los Cabos. And we also have our guest speaker, an expert in PBL, John Larmer. So hi, both of you. Hi, Juan Pablo, and hi, John.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? First,
it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Juan Pablo. So first, I would like to introduce our speakers and tell you more about them in depth. So first, Juan Pablo Suarez, he likes educational leadership because of the possibility to inspire and be a role model and transfer his passion for education to his students, teachers, and even parents. After working in the corporate world and as a financial manager for several years, Juan decided to pursue a career in education. He was born in Bogota, Colombia, and Juan Pablo attended a Catholic school from pre-K to high school. He finished his Bachelor of Arts in Business, Administration and Finance at the University of La Sabana in Chía, Colombia in 2001. During that time, he also completed an international trade course and ESL, English Language Pronunciation Program, at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. After living in D.C. for a while and working at an international organization, Juan Pablo moved to Houston and decided it was time for a career change. He received his bilingual education certificate from Texas in 2005. He attended summer education programs at both Harvard Graduate School of Education and the Graduate School of Education at Stanford University. In 2015, he finished his Master of Arts in Bilingual Education and Leadership at Houston's very own University of St. Thomas. He received an award from USC's chapter of Kappa Delta Pi because of his GPA and zeal for education. Juan Pablo will graduate in May of 2022 from a doctoral program in Executive Educational Leader from HBU in Houston, Texas. Juan Pablo has been happily married for 19 years and has 2 children, Pablo and Gabriela, who currently are attending Gimnasio Los Cabos. So hi, Juan Pablo, welcome. Now we're going to talk more about Gabriel Diago. He has been the Director of Innovation at Gimnasio Los Cabos for the past 10 years. He has been leading the transformation of schools from traditional learning to project-based learning with Dr. Fran Locker and his architectural and education consultant firm. Founder of the Golden Circle Schools, a community of schools with the goal that every person in the community pursues their purpose. So hi, Gabriel, welcome to the conference. And finally, but not least, we also have John Larmer. And well, John, our guest speaker, he's an internationally recognized expert in project-based learning, or PBL. He is an author, speaker, editor, curriculum developer, and professional learning designer. He's passionate, an innovative educator, and a longtime advocate for progressive school reform. Dedicated to making learning more meaningful for all of his students. John also was a key builder for PBL Works at the Buck Institute for Education, the industry leader in project-based learning, serving as its editor-in-chief, director of publications, and director of product development. He also co-developed the model for gold standard PBL, that is the foundation of PBL Works products and services. and he also oversaw the quality of all its reading materials and website content. Once again, let's welcome all of our speakers. So it's an honor to have you all here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sophia. So let me share my screen and I will start my webinar. Welcome, everyone. I'll be talking with you for about 30 minutes, perhaps a little more, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So please be thinking of your questions. If you want to put them into the chat of my presentation, that's fine. And I'm also going to ask you to enter some things in the chat feature when I give the signal. So be ready for that. All right, well, let me share my screen then and show you my slides. Okay. All right, can you see my slides full screen? All right, good. All right then, let me just, my title is important because I really want to make the point that I think all students deserve project-based learning, not just some students. Sometimes people think that it's only for gifted programs, or only for older students, or students who don't have special needs, or who are perhaps lower. It's not for students who are lower skilled, whose test scores are not good. But I disagree. I think project-based learning can work for all students with the right support, and they deserve it because it's a very powerful and effective way to learn. All right, my background, as Sophia said, I was for 20 years with the Buck Institute for Education, now known as PBL Works. I'm with Defined Learning now, a company that produces sort of an educational technology company that produces online projects in STEM and career education. I'm a former high school teacher. I taught social studies, taught history and government and psychology and economics, and a little bit of English classes as a high school teacher back in the 1990s. And I live in Mill Valley, California. That's a map there showing where I live just north of San Francisco. So I'm glad to be with you today. And please be asking questions and have questions at the end. I look forward to hearing what you want to know. I'm the author of 2 books, and one is called Project-Based Teaching, which was mainly written by my colleague and friend, Susie Boss. I contributed to it. And then I wrote Setting the Standard for Project-Based Learning with Susie and John Mergendaler, the former director of the Buck Institute. And those 2 books are from ASCD, and they've just been translated into Spanish, actually, in Chile, the Fundación Educación, I forget the name of it, Fundación Educacional, I think, in Chile. I'm not sure if they're available yet, but they have been translated. And I've written several books over the years and many, many blog posts about project-based learning. I've probably written the most about PBL as anybody. Susie has written a lot too. So anyway, that's enough about me. Here's our agenda today. I'm going to talk about why I think project-based learning is a good idea for all students, what PBL is and is not, some common misconceptions about it. I'll talk to you about some types of projects and how to tell the difference between a dessert project and main course project-based learning. And finally, I'll talk about the high-quality PBL criteria. What makes a project a high-quality main course learning experience for students? And then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. All right, I'm going to show you some examples of projects and ask you to imagine these. And these are going from young students up to high school. So imagine 5-year-old students creating a map of their local community with words and pictures based on interviews with family and community members. They make it available to newcomers to the area as a way to welcome them. Imagine 7-year-old students studying the issue of hunger in their community and then deciding to take action. They work with a local food bank to collect and distribute food to people in need at Christmas time. Imagine 9-year-old students designing tiny houses to meet the needs of people in their community. They interview their clients, create blueprints and a written proposal with a budget, and make a presentation to their clients. Imagine 11-year-old students creating a plan for starting their own business. They do market research, generate ideas, and talk with people in the business world. Then create a formal business plan, which they present to a panel of potential investors. Imagine 13-year-old students creating a literary playlist of music and songs with a written explanation that corresponds to themes and characters in a novel. They post their playlists on a class website and share them on social media. Imagine high school students conducting an energy audit of their school, then making recommendations on how to reduce energy use in a written report and a presentation to school administrators. And finally, imagine high school students studying various issues in upcoming elections and then deciding where they stand and planning a community information event to share their ideas. Now, I don't have to imagine all those projects because I've seen them. Those projects are projects that I've either seen in person or heard about from teachers or seen videos of. And those are some of the students in some of those projects. You can see in the top left, those kindergarten students looking very proud after a presentation. This just makes the point that project-based learning can work for all students. There's lots of varieties of project-based learning, but you notice one thing about all those projects, at the end, they all had a public product, and that's very important, that they shared their work with someone beyond their classmates and the teacher. And that really, I think, is key, along with authenticity, to make it really real world, makes it much more powerful for students. Here's what a high school graduate said when she was making a speech at a conference I went to a few years ago, where she went to a high school that did a lot of project-based learning. Katie Wynn, she said, project-based learning did not teach me to sit quietly. Rather, it taught me to be adaptable and embrace ambiguity, to seek out the value in others and lead inclusively, and to be confident in forging my own life and career. I think that's an amazing statement. Imagine if more and more of our high school graduates could say that about their futures. And that's, I think, an important reminder of what project-based learning can do for students. It builds a lot more skills and creates the kind of people we need in this world, not just people who know a lot of information like traditional teaching. All right, we've seen during the pandemic that there are lots of reasons, I think, why I think education may be shifting, or at least it should shift in a project-based learning direction, because there were a lot of lessons learned during the pandemic. I mean, here in the United States, we noticed a lot of students trying to learn in the traditional way, sitting there at home on their computers, and it just was not working. It's not very engaging. I mean, it wasn't engaging to begin with, but students went to school, they show up, you know, their friends are there, they like their teachers, so they would take notes and memorize information for a test, but it was clear that that approach was not working very well in remote learning during the pandemic. So I think we learned this lesson. It's time to clean up the curriculum. Don't try and cover so much fact-based knowledge. Go for more depth over breadth. This is difficult because a lot of those state tests or national tests students have to take, they are about a lot of fact-based knowledge. There's some signs that that is changing, and I hope it does change in the future as more and more schools turn to project-based learning. Second, I think there'll be a move from passive and compliant to active and engaged learning. Right now, a lot of students are just passive. They absorb information, they memorize it, they read a textbook, they do worksheets, they listen to a teacher lecture. They go along with it because they have to, they're required to, you know, graduate, to get a job, whatever. But that's not very engaging. It's not really it's creating a desire to know deep inside a student. But if they're active and engaged, like project-based learning does, I think it's a much better way to become a lifelong learner. I think we'll see a move from fixed to flexible time for learning. A lot of students who were doing PBL at home, if their teachers during the pandemic were using PBL, they could do the projects when they had time. It was not just during the 60 minutes you're in class. They could do it later or over the weekend, or, you know, with working with their peers using communication tools online. There are lots of flexible ways to learn that we saw in the pandemic, and I think we should move to more of that kind of learning. And finally, it's time for more authentic learning, more real world learning, because students today, more than ever, I think, are really eager to tackle real world issues. They know there are a lot of issues in their community, in their nation, in the wider world that need to be addressed. So we need them, and they're eager to contribute their thoughts and ideas and hard work to helping solve real world problems. So I'd like to pose this question now and be thinking about it to teachers and students in the audience. What are some real world problems you would like to solve? Could be local in your community or even in your school for younger students. Could be national issues or regional issues, or worldwide issues like climate change. So just be thinking of some real world problems you would like to solve or you think are important to solve. And I'd like you to, during my presentation, think about that. If you want to type your answer in the chat, but don't hit return, don't enter them yet. I'm going to ask you to do that all at once near the end of my presentation so we can see them all coming in at once. Okay, so just be thinking about that. What are some real world problems you think need to be solved? All right, I want to quickly go over the reasons for project-based learning, and I've already hinted at this. It's a more engaging way to learn. We know that students, I mean, I saw this when I was a high school teacher, and I would try to give an interesting lecture, and some teachers can do that, but I was not able to. And most teachers, you know, a lecture is not the most engaging way to learn. Same with a textbook, worksheets, all that kind of stuff. Memorizing information for a test. So I think project-based learning, I've seen students just come alive, and all students, this is where the all students deserve PBL comes in. We shouldn't give some students boring education and only, you know, the top students or the more wealthy students get engaging methods like project-based learning, because that just does not create equity in our society. It does not give those students the power they need to be successful in their lives. So the engagement piece for me is very important. We've seen that project-based learning actually improves learning. Now, as I said, you can't cover as much fact-based knowledge through project-based learning. That's true, but it goes in much more deeply. Students learn more deeply. They retain what they learn. They remember it longer. And so research has shown, I'll share this with you soon. Some recent research has shown that students do just as well on standardized tests if they're taught with project-based learning, because the information stays with them longer. And it's more powerful, it's more engaging, they're going to want to learn. And I've just seen students learn incredible things through project-based learning. Now, some of those things they learn are what we call success skills or 21st century skills that will help students in their college, in their careers, in their life. Things like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, learning how to collaborate with other people, making presentations, communication, innovation, project management, all these kinds of skills which are really helpful in today's workplace and today's economy, and helpful when students get to college as well. Here's a formal definition of project-based learning, which I wrote several years ago at the Buck Institute. Project-based learning is a teaching method in which students gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time to investigate and respond to an authentic, engaging, and complex question, problem, or challenge. Now, let me explain that a little bit, some of the pieces of that. It's important to note that students are gaining knowledge and skills. That's the point. They're not just doing it for a fun activity. It's to gain important knowledge and skills. It takes time. It's not just a quick activity. It's not a 2 or 3 day experience usually. A good project, in my experience, takes at least a week, sometimes 2, 3, or 4 weeks. And I've seen projects which last, months, but typically 3 or 4 weeks is kind of, I guess, a typical length of time. Sometimes projects are less lengthy in a math class. I've seen shorter projects in math. It depends how much time teachers spend with students, but the teacher should, I think, have most of the project work done in class. And usually it takes about 5 hours minimum for a good project with all the pieces to work well. So 5 hours minimum contact time, teachers and students working together. And finally, there's a there's investigation and there's a response. So students, that's that public product I talked about. Students are somehow answering this driving question or solving this complex problem and presenting their work at the end to somebody beyond the teacher and classmates. Let's go over some common misconceptions about project-based learning. And this woman here looks like she's not sure about PBL. So one misconception is that PBL is not effective for teaching factual knowledge, like what is measured on traditional tests. The focus is on soft skills. Soft skills is another name for those 21st century success skills I mentioned. And that is not true. It's true that PBL does teach 21st century skills very well, but it can teach factual knowledge also. And students still need to learn a lot of things to do a project well. And that's where some traditional teaching methods might come in, which I'll explain in a minute at that point. All right, another misconception that projects are too hard for teachers to manage when students are working independently on different projects. Now, that can be true if PBL is done a certain way. If you have 30 students in a classroom and they each pick a topic and are off doing a project about it, that is challenging. And I think that's a great way to learn, but I think a lot of projects also should be done as a whole class, where students might work in teams or work as a class with the teacher sort of facilitating and managing the project. So they're all working on the same project. There could be variations in what students produce and their answer to a driving question, the product they create. But if the teacher is managing one project where our students are all doing it at roughly the same time, especially when you're starting out, I recommend that as a way to learn what project-based learning is. Then perhaps at the end of the year or after a few years when students are older and know how to work independently on a project, then they can go off and do their independent projects. Some people believe that some students are not able to work well in a PBL classroom. And this may be true if students have never experienced independent learning, if they've always just sat there quietly taking notes and doing worksheets and reading their textbook. So you need to get students used to it and teach them how to work in teams, how to do research, how to create products collaboratively, how to think about a driving question or a challenging problem. So you do need to build students' skills. So I recommend sort of starting small with some little mini projects, maybe to get students used to it. And you need to talk to students and parents and the whole community about what PBL is and why it's different and why it's better. And so you have to sort of gradually introduce students to project-based learning, not just drop them into it all of a sudden and expect they're going to do well. Some people think the teacher doesn't really teach in PBL. The teacher just steps back and acts as a facilitator or a resource provider. And that's not true. We wrote a whole book, Susie Boss and I, about project-based teaching to talk about the active role a teacher plays. They sometimes might even give a lecture or have students look in a textbook for some information they need for the project. The teacher is monitoring students' work, checking in with student teams. Are you meeting your deadlines? Are you doing your tasks? There's formative assessment. You're checking on students' understanding and their progress. You're teaching students how to work in teams. You're teaching students how to solve problems. So lots of active teaching going on in a PBL classroom. And just a reminder here that traditional teaching tools can be used in PBL. If students need information and a short lecture is the best way to give it to them, then that's okay. Because students perhaps have already asked some questions. They said, we need to know this, we need to know that for our project. So the teacher then can provide the information they need through a short lecture if that's the best way to get it to them. Or perhaps they could talk to an expert and get information from an expert. And maybe the textbook is there as a resource. There's information there that might be useful for a project, but it's not a guide to be followed strictly. Assessment tools like quizzes and tests have a place in project-based learning because you still need to measure what individual students are learning, not just what teams are producing. An end of project test to measure individual student learning is fine, but it's not the test is not nearly as important as it is in traditional teaching. It's just a way of measuring student learning. But the most important thing is, of course, the project and the product students create. And for younger students, elementary school teachers can still provide lessons to build their knowledge and skills during a project. But they come later. They don't come first. The project comes first, then comes all this traditional teaching. I'll explain more about that point in a few minutes. All right, another misconception, the research shows that project-based learning does not work. Well, that's not true. There is lots of research showing it does work if it is done well, and that's important. I should mention John Hattie, the Australian researcher. He found that these practices were effective at raising student achievement. Strong student-teacher relationships, high expectations, frequent helpful feedback to students, and the deliberate teaching of learning strategies. And guess what? All of those are found in high-quality project-based learning. And so I think that's important, even if, and Hattie studied problem-based learning mostly in colleges before 2005. There were a lot of things with his research that I would argue with, but I think the key thing to remember is the effective teaching practices are still used in good project-based learning. I won't go over these in detail, just to point you to these. There's been 3 recent studies of project-based learning. These are all available, by the way, from the Lucas Education Research Group or at pblworks.org in their research section. There were studies of 2nd grade social studies and literacy, which found that a PBL approach raised achievement, even in high poverty communities, which even helped their reading scores. 3rd grade science and social emotional learning. So students perform better on a science assessment. And they also gain socially and emotionally, things like learning how to be reflective and collaborative. And this one at high school advanced placement classes, which are like the top most challenging classes in American high schools, in environmental science and US government politics, they found that a PBL approach worked better for students. They passed their advanced placement tests, which helped get them college credit at a higher rate than students in traditional classrooms. And students from low-income households gained as much as higher income students. So again, that makes the point that PBL is something all students deserve. So you can find all those at PBL Works. You'll find them at the Lucas Education Research Group, LER. They conducted these studies. And I encourage you, if you're interested in the research, to check those out. Okay, back to our agenda. Let's talk about the types of projects, dessert versus main course, PBL. All right, there's what I would call a dessert project. So students in elementary school are studying different habitats. This student, it looks like, was making a little model, a diorama of a rainforest. And so that's called a project. And I would say that's a project, but it's not project-based learning. It's what we call a dessert project. It probably came after the traditional unit on habitats. The science was already taught, and then students built their models. There are lots of examples of this. You probably know some from when you were in elementary school. If you're a student, you probably experience these still, even going up to high school. And if you're a parent, you might have seen your child doing projects like this over the years. And I'm not saying they're bad. It's better than just doing worksheets all day long, but it's not true project-based learning. There's a place for these, but don't confuse it with PBL. Or this one, building a model of the ancient pyramids of Egypt, or making a poster of the causes of global warming, or doing a research project about a famous mathematician. My son did that actually in high school. But to do that project, they didn't learn math by doing that project, really. It was done on the side. So maybe that was a side dish, not dessert. But the teacher taught the class in a traditional way, pretty much. And students did this little side project, and it was good. They learned about a famous mathematician, so it had some value. But again, that was not project-based learning because it was not used to teach the main content of the course. So instead of making that little habitat model, the diorama of a habitat, what if students learned that same science content through a project like this? They learn that habitats for new zoo animals are needed. They actually connect with people at the Detroit Zoo. And this is a project that was actually done in Detroit, Michigan. So they actually had a meeting online, I think, through Skype with some people from the zoo. So students learned about these new animals arriving, and they designed habitats. They learned the science they needed to learn and created models and wrote proposals for their habitats, and then presented their ideas to the zoo's education director at the end of the project. So you can imagine how important that felt to students and how much they learned. And so again, they learned the science through doing the project, the project was not some activity done at the end or on the side of the unit. So these are kind of the different types of projects versus project-based learning. And the dessert project is typically something students make. It's like that model of the pyramid or the diorama of the rainforest. Or it could be a research task where students research something, then make a presentation using PowerPoint slides. Or they write a report, maybe. They're usually done individually at home. Students might choose the topic, but they're usually just following teacher directions on what they're supposed to do. And learning the important content is not the goal. They learn something, but that's not the way the main content is taught. Okay, then there's an applied learning experience where the project is done after traditional instruction. And this might be useful sometimes, for example, in a math course, or I've seen it in business courses where students learn some material traditionally and then they apply it to a real world situation, sometimes called a capstone project that ends a course or ends a unit or ends a semester. So there's a place for that. Those can be very useful and maybe necessary in some courses, but the main course project-based learning is what I like to promote, where students learn the knowledge and skills through doing the project. The project is introduced at the beginning. It creates the need to know, which then engages students, drives their learning, and that's answering those need to know questions becomes the framework for the instruction that follows. Here's just a quick way to think about this, a different way. Here's a traditional unit with the dessert project at the end. So it's lectures, teacher lessons, activities, quizzes, more lessons, a review, a test, and then at the end comes a project. As opposed to a project-based learning unit where the project is launched with an engaging question or a task, student questions are generated, they build their knowledge and skills through some traditional methods perhaps, and through their own independent research and talking with experts perhaps. They develop their products, their answers to the driving question. They get feedback to improve this quality. They reflect on what they're learning and how they're learning, how they're doing as a team. And finally, they present their work. It doesn't need to be a formal presentation. Perhaps they're just posting it online, but there's some kind of a public event where they share their work. And that's when summative assessment, a test might happen, and some reflection looking back on the project. So that's the key difference. Another way to think about it, this is a good analogy from Kristen DeVivo at Lucas Education Research. She said, think of the project as the engine that drives the train. It's not the shiny caboose at the end. So that's another good way to think about it. Main course dessert, or the engine, not the caboose. All right, let me conclude by just talking about the framework for high quality project-based learning. This is how to make sure your projects are main course project-based learning. This was written a few years ago. I helped write this. It was facilitated by the Buck Institute for Education, but it was a process that involved a lot of different organizations, the High Tech High, New Tech Network, college professors, the Envision schools in America, EL Education, lots of different networks of schools, progressive schools, college professors, experts on project-based learning, all came together to develop this framework with these 6 criteria. And it's open in the HQPBL website. You can download a paper about this with the research behind it. I think these are great guidelines which describe the student experience. What should students experience in a high quality project? So first is intellectual challenge and accomplishment, where they're learning deeply, like I said, they're thinking critically, and they're trying to do really high quality work. This is where the inquiry process comes in, where you're asking questions, you're finding resources to answer your questions, you're digging deeper and deeper, and as you get deeper into a topic. And that high quality work is very important too. At the end of a project, when you're sharing it publicly, students want to make sure their work is of high quality. Authenticity. Students work on projects that are meaningful and relevant. to their culture, their lives, their future. So it could be relevant to the real world right now they live in, local, national, international. It could be to a career, authentic to the world of work, or perhaps authentic to just issues that are of concern to students in their lives right now. Again, it really helps make projects engaging for students. The public product, we discussed this a lot. So I just want to make the point here that by publicly displaying work, students' work can be discussed and critiqued. And so it makes student work public. It's not just a private student to teacher relationship. It's like other people, other teachers, other students, parents, communities can all see good student work on display and discuss how to make it better. Collaboration, a very important 21st century skill in the workplace. And collaboration could be with other students. There should be some teamwork, I think, in most projects, or perhaps it's getting guidance from adult experts or mentors, collaboration with an adult during a project, or with an organization outside of school. It's a lot of good collaboration happens that way. Project management skills, very important in today's workplace also, where students learn how to manage their time, their tasks, how to find resources, how to hit deadlines. As you can tell, very important skill in today's world of work. And finally, reflection. So students are thinking about what they're learning, how they're growing as a person, what skills they're developing, where they need to grow even more. So that's an important piece, both during a project and at the end of a project. Oops. All right, so let me just finish by asking you to please enter your answers in the chat now. Students, teachers, anybody else out there who wants to give an answer. What are some real world problems you would like to solve? And let's see if we have some answers in the chat, and then we'll have time to conclude with one more thought. Let me just stop sharing the screen. Find my arrow here, excuse me. Oh, there it is. All right. All right, I'll be seeing some things in the chat.
All right. We are not seeing yet.
Okay, if anybody has any real world problems, please post them in the chat. Let me just finish with one last thought, though. I wanted to just make the point that project-based learning, another reason for project-based learning is that it's rewarding for teachers. You know, it's great for students, but teachers find being a PBL teacher an exciting way to teach. They see their students come alive in the classroom. So it's not just good for students, it's good for teachers too. So I really encourage you to use project-based learning, and I hope it spreads in the world of education today. So thank you very much. And now it's time for questions.
No, right. Thank you, John. Your presentation was amazing. I actually agree with a lot of things you said. And as a high school student that has been really active in project-based learning, I can confirm each step and each idea you introduced in your presentation. So thanks a lot. Maybe Gabriel or Juan Pablo, would you like to add something?
Yes, I was thinking, and John, in the last couple of days since, after I came back to Bogota, Colombia, and it's been a while, and one of my biggest questions have been, and I would like to inspire our high school students to draw into this reflective thinking, because I've been, like, for instance, one of the issues that I've seen as in our capital city is like transportation. So, for instance, I'm challenging, and I would like to get your feedback on this. I would like to challenge our students to find ways that they can think of ways to solve, like one of the biggest issues that I see here, which is transportation. I see that as I could tell now, it's like the transportation system here in Bogota and even in Chía, it's kind of, I can see, or I can tell, it's collapse. It's just traffic everywhere. So I'm challenging the students, and I would like to hear from both of you, or the three of you, ideas in how we can inspire and engage students into thinking of ways of creating solutions for this issue.
I think that's a great topic. I've seen young elementary school students doing projects about the parking lot at their school. How can we, control the flow of cars into our parking lot so people, so there's not a traffic jam getting in, and the cars keep moving, the kids get picked up. So I've seen young students start that kind of thinking. But I think maybe partnering with local government, and that's really motivating for students. If they think they're being asked to do something, not just by their teacher, but by someone from the real world, that's very powerful. So yeah, that's a great example of a real world problem.
Yes. No, I agree. And it's one of the things that big cities suffer with the most. And I think it's also a matter of asking how will they see transportation in the future? Because transportation has been changing so much, and we've seen that it's not just about cars anymore. I don't know if you've seen, John, that they're doing a project in LA that's going underground, and it's the Boring company is creating an underground tunnel that's going across the city.
Yeah, that's LA needs something like that. Yeah, and I think it's important. This on projects like this is a good example, I think, of there need to be constraints. Like if you ask students to imagine new transportation systems, I mean, that might be fun, but they might come up with, flying cars or something. So you need to have constraints where you need to really think about the technology and the economics and how feasible it really is. That's important for a lot of projects I've seen over the years where students sometimes get a little too creative with their ideas. It's good to have some creativity, of course, at the beginning, but then all good creative problem solving has constraints. It has to work in our city with our economy, with our people. So it's a good example of real world learning with constraints.
I agree.
All right. I would like to add that from your presentation, John, I loved a couple of elements that you touch base on, and one of them is how the project creates the need to know, and how the students create that inspiration on learning. And I think that's one of the key elements, because I would say one of the issues that I had during my 19 years in the US working with students and PBLs, not PBLs, but regular classrooms, was trying to have students engage in their learning and to be the ones who actually drive, or in that case, in the past, drove that learning. So I think that's one of the key elements from PBL, is that the students really feel that need for thinking ahead of what's really what I would like to learn, and drive that learning, and in some way or somehow push their teachers to get more out of the learning. Because I've seen that for many years. I've seen the students that were not using PBL, or schools that were not using PBL. I saw the students as they were just all the time either bored, or they were not excited about their learning. So I think that's one of the key points that you mentioned in your presentation about PBL.
Yeah, and even students who do well in school, I think, many of them are bored too. I mean, a few like school, they love listening to a history lecture or whatever, but I think even students who get good grades and go to college and are successful at school, they've learned how to play the game. You memorize for a test, you get your grade, your good grade, your high scores, you play the game, you get to college, you get a job. But that's not really, that's not the right way to learn. You should be learning for a more intrinsic, a motivation that comes from inside you, not just because you want to get good grades to please your parents or get a job or something. Sophia, did you notice that when students are doing project-based learning, they're much more engaged and excited about learning?
Yeah, I actually wanted to add something about that, and I can really confirm that. Like, I understand what you said about like great students that understand how to play the game, but really, if great students still know how to play that game, they still want or sometimes prefer to perform this kind of projects, especially when they can get involved with the issues they're most interested with. So for example, what I really appreciate from PBL in my school context is that it does not only like engage students to learning about that project or about that topic, but it really does engage students to their passions. When they get to choose the topic or they get to choose the project or the problem, they can really engage or get to discover even their own passion. And I think that's really useful for their life project, their future, their college decisions. So it's really useful for students, and it's not only about learning, because they certainly learn about a lot with project-based learning, but it is also useful, and I could say that it is really beautiful how the students get to discover their passions or their life purpose through project-based learning. Mm-hmm. And I really seen it within my classroom with my classmates, and it's really common, And well, I would also like to ask you, Jan, about, so parents tend to be somewhat concerned about project-based learning at times, because standardized test scores are like thought to be the only way to get into a college. So they are really concerned about it. So I know students that learn from PBL, they can still perform excellently in standardized tests, and they can also achieve great scores. But, I've heard this misconception from parents or even some students that, a school, any institution does either focus on project-based learning or in the standardized test preparation. So I know that is not true, and I don't think that way, but I would like to know, what would you tell to parents that are concerned about this?
Yeah, that's a big question. Great question. Well, like you said, you could tell parents that when project-based learning is done well, students learn and do well in those tests. And that's where a school or the government needs to sort of communicate with parents to show that PBL works, that these students are being taught PBL, and look, they're doing well in their tests and they're getting into college. So there's some communication needs to happen. I think when schools share project work publicly and parents can see what great work it is, that helps build the case for project-based learning. In the United States, and I think in some places around the world, colleges are beginning to look at more than just test scores. And the pandemic helped speed up this process. So more colleges are thinking about student portfolios where they share examples of their work, and project-based learning is a great way to build a strong portfolio of your work. Some colleges are exploring and beginning to look at portfolio admissions. But also, I think there's a strong argument that PBL prepares students well for college. And there is some research to back this up, that students who are taught with a project-based learning approach, they know how to talk to their teachers. And in college, talking to your professor is very important for success. And learning how to work in teams, how to make presentations, how to work independently, because in college, you're much more independent. And so PBL builds a lot of the skills, a lot of the habits of learning that work very well for students when they get to college. And it's like some research from some schools in San Francisco where their students were the first in their family to go to college. They were mostly from low-income households. Their students got to college and stayed in college longer than students in non-PBL schools. So it's a complex topic, and also I think those tests need to be changed, but that's a bigger topic. That's a slow process, but I think there is a movement heading that direction slowly in all places around the world.
So John, with that being said, how would you change the tests if you had, the power to change them around the world?
Well, first of all, I would include portfolios as well as test scores. The test, I think, should measure more about critical thinking and problem solving, not just factual knowledge. So I'm not an expert on testing, so I can't say exactly what kind of test it is, but I think a test that measures more how students think, how they solve problems, and there are some examples of this: performance task-based tests. And some of the new tests in the United States, the Smarter Balance test, for example, which aligns with the new Common Core state standards, they do emphasize thinking skills and depth of knowledge and application of knowledge, not just like applying mathematics, for example, not just knowing how to solve a problem. So there are some tests that are moving in that direction now. I think a lot of it, though, the tests are probably going to always be here. And so students have to do well in those tests. But I think the key is to make sure project-based learning is done well and prepare students for those tests or for their portfolios or other challenges in life.
All right.
I agree with you, John. I think that one of the biggest issues that I've seen, and that's going back to the question that Sophia was asking about how to present or have share with parents about PBL. I think that from my experience is that everything starts with the students. Is like every single movement, even if we look at a global level, everything has always been started by students. And I think that there's these we're in a perfect moment, and I think that's one of our cases here at GLC, where students like Sophia and many others, because since I came and arrived here since January of this year, every single day I've had learned and listened to a different positive story with great outcomes of projects like the one with Sophia that I had the pleasure to listen from her when she presented me with her pictures, with the presentation that she had a couple of years ago that she took to the UN in the US. And I think that we have so many stories here at GLC of great PBL outcomes of projects that I think that everything, Sophia, and this goes back to you, that everything starts with the students. So with your project and the other projects that have been successful from so many students here at GLC, I think that we are creating this movement which will pass on and present to parents of the importance, the benefits, and the success of PBL. So I think that in our case, I think that in my new role as academic director, that's going to be one of the things that we have to start working on more, is sharing successful stories like the one that you just shared with John and Gabriel a couple of minutes ago. And we need to do more of that. And that's a way to show to parents that it wasn't only your PBL that changed, that presented with a great idea and a great solution to a problem, but at the same time, in your case, Sophia, it's helping you to access to a great university outside our country, because they saw in you the power and the I would say the skills that a student will need to be successful in a school like the one you're applying, because they see something different in you. They see that need and that interest for helping the community, helping the society, and changing with new ideas. So I think that going back to your point, Sophia, and see how we can present this to parents, I think that's the best case. Like when we have our exhibitions in less than a month here, I think that's going to be a way for us to tell the parents, here it is. This is the great things that we're doing through PBL, and we need your support as well, because not only through the word of mouth, sharing with others what we're doing with PBL, but also being that light, I would say, in our educational system here in Bogota and in Colombia, that we're the leaders in PBL by sharing not only your PBL projects, but also telling the successful stories like you in your life, now that you're a student in 12th grade going to an international university. So I think we have to do more. We have to celebrate more. We have to share more of what we're doing. And I think that we have a big task ahead of us, trying to share that with more parents, people, and the community.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, John.
Yeah, I can really agree with you.
Yes. Juan Pablo, thank you so much for that. John, so thank you so much. We're nearing the end of our hour together. This has been great. And just, well, so you know, we are going to be having our Revolution Education Congress here in Bogota. This one is going to be Schools of Purpose. So what we really want to do, or what we want to do, is ask, what is the purpose of schools? Who is schools for? And how might we create schools where students run into them in the morning faster than they leave in the afternoon? How do we do that? And I think what you've told us today is exactly that. I can see Sophia being a PBL student who is engaged, and I really do hope that for the next, post-pandemic, we really start wondering, what are the purpose of schools, and who are the schools for? And we start creating those spaces for those students who are going to be in a world we don't know. And well, today is also telling us that the world is changing constantly, and that they are successful, and more than successful, that they give their knowledge to the world to make it better. That's for me what the purpose is, and that we show these students, they can create a better world, and we can create a better school for them.
That's right. Yeah, we need those students. So let's go, kids.
All right, John. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Sophia, thank you so much. And Juan Pablo, you too. We'll see you at the Congress, and I know we'll be seeing each other a lot. Susie's going to be here at the Congress, John.
Right. Yep.
Here in Bogota. She's part of our advisory board.
Yes.
And I hope you can come in. I know this year you had some conflicts with the deeper learning, but I hope you do get to come here at one point.
Yes, I hope to also. So best wishes for your work, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's been
Thank you,
John, and I'm a big fan of you and your work. So you have here one of your fans #1 here at Campus Juan Pablo Suarez.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.